In my previous life, I abandoned all my dignity to curry favor with the Regent Prince in order to survive. Little did I know that upon being reborn, I would cross paths with him at the lowest point of his life. To escape his pursuers, Xie Yunhan had fallen so far that he was reduced to begging, forced to fight wild dogs for food. The maid pulled on my sleeve, timidly saying, "Miss, don't go over there. His eyes are all red, he's really scary." I walked up to him and still handed him the bread I was holding. He was starving and took a bite, but continued to stare at me with those unsettling eyes. I slapped him across the face. "Did you say thank you?" The maid, seeing me hit a beggar, was shocked. "Miss, have you lost your mind?" I wasn't crazy. But if I didn't take revenge, wouldn't I have been reborn for nothing? After slapping him, my palm went numb. The maid behind me, Xiao Hong, screamed in fright, "Miss, have you lost your mind?" Xie Yunhan's dirty face even had clear fingerprints on it. In my previous life, he would have killed me long ago, and I would have died. Unfortunately, the high and mighty Regent Prince is now just a fugitive. The patrol soldiers were approaching, their weapons and armor clanging against each other. Xie Yunhan lowered his gaze, hiding the cold intent in his black eyes, and whispered, "Thank you." Hearing this, I smiled contentedly. This young lady is very satisfied. I brushed the dust off my hands, pulled out a few pieces of silver from my pouch, and tossed them at his feet, smiling at him. "These are all for you. If you wish to repay me in the future, remember that I am the legitimate daughter of the Song family, Song Lianyu." After distributing the porridge, sitting in the carriage on the way back to the mansion, Xiao Hong couldn't help but ask me, "Miss, why did you call yourself the eldest miss just now?" I smiled. I was distributing porridge on behalf of my eldest sister. A good reputation should naturally fall upon her. Of course, if there were any consequences in the future, they should naturally fall upon her as well. Xiao Hong sighed with concern. "I wonder if the eldest Mrs. Cold has gotten better." I held the hand warmer, my lips curling coldly. "She is naturally better. In my previous life, at this time, I hurriedly finished distributing porridge for Song Lianyu, worried about her cold. On the way back to the mansion, I passed by the Drunken Moon Pavilion and specially bought a bowl of her favorite red sugar rice wine. I kept it warm by the fire in the carriage all the way back. I carried the warm rice wine to her courtyard. There were no maids at the door, so I pushed it open and entered. Through the layers of red curtains, I saw a naked man. I was so scared that I dropped the porcelain bowl, and as I screamed, the man rushed over and covered my mouth tightly. Song Lianyu had gently pulled down the silk robe that had slipped off her shoulder and gave the man a meaningful glance. The man shoved a pill into my mouth. Before I lost consciousness and fainted, I recognized the man as Qing Kong, a stable boy in the mansion. When I woke up again, I found myself locked in the woodshed. I heard the maid's cries outside the woodshed, and Qing Kong took advantage of the commotion to pretend to run into the backyard from outside. He exclaimed that he had seen a man climbing over the wall and escaping. Song Lianyu kicked open the door of the woodshed with her stepmother and caught me with my clothes in disarray. Everyone in the mansion was saying that I had committed adultery because my mother had been caught committing adultery and drowned in a pig cage. I was her biological daughter, so naturally I had the same character as her. Song Lianyu looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Linger, you've been by my side since you were 5 years old. I never thought you would do something so shameful. I don't want you as my sister." No matter how I tried to explain, no one believed me. Song Lianyu has always been the pure and untouched eldest daughter of the Song family. My father, to preserve the Song family's reputation, gave me a piece of white silk and told me to take my own life. Xiao Hong stole the key from the housekeeper and secretly let me escape. I crawled out through the dog hole in the backyard and fled. After escaping the mansion, I had no money and was deceived by a beggar with 2 steamed buns. Then sold into servitude as a lowly maid. Later, I made my way to the capital, infiltrated the imperial selection, and climbed my way to the position of imperial concubine through cunning and scheming. By the time I sought revenge, the Song mansion had already fallen into ruin. Having experienced the storms of palace intrigue and political upheaval in my previous life, revenge was now as easy as pie for me. After returning to the mansion, I quietly took on the role of the second young miss of the Song family. I never stepped out of the front gate or the second gate, dedicating myself to protecting Song Lianyue. When she had secret affairs, I watched the door. When she behaved immorally, I delivered messages. When she eloped, I brought the ladder. Late at night, Song Lianyue sat atop a high wall, tears welling in her eyes, looking at me with gratitude. Linger, your sister will never forget you. I held the ladder and looked up at her with a smile. Sister, of course you can't forget me. After all, I've remembered you for 2 lifetimes. She didn't understand my meaning and tilted her head slightly to look at me. The night was as dark as ink, and in the distance, faint lights began to appear. As the lights grew closer, I realized they were officials from the government office, running toward us with torches. It was I who had reported her to the authorities. The Song mansion had lost a significant amount of silver notes, jewelry, and land deeds. Some of the lost items were found on the horse slave Qin Kong, while the rest were discovered in Song Lianyue's personal belongings. My father arrived at the government office with my stepmother. Liu Zhizhou was Song Lianyue's maternal uncle. Knowing that my father valued his reputation above all else, he ensured that the case was heard only at night and not a word was leaked to the outside world. Song Lianyue dared not utter a word upon seeing her parents. Her stepmother asked her several questions but could not elicit any information. My stepmother could only look at me. Linger, you and Lianyue are closest to each other. What happened? Tell me. I glanced at Qin Kong, who was being held down by the officials. But before I could say anything, Song Lianyue spoke up before me. It was Song Chuling. My daughter saw her trying to elope with the horse slave Qin Kong, so she was persuading her. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Yes. When my sister was persuading me, she was still wearing a maid's clothes. My father wasn't stupid. On the way here, he already knew the general outline of the story. Song Lianyue didn't throw this dirty water on me, but instead admitted to the shameful act of eloping herself. My father was furious and slapped Song Lianyue across the face. You did such a shameful thing yourself. Yet you dared to frame your own sister. I pinched my thigh hard to force out 2 tears. Sister. They found the letters you wrote to Qin Kong on his person. This cannot be hidden from father. My father took the letter handed to him by the servant, read a few lines, and couldn't help but slap Song Lianyue across the face again. This is your handwriting. How dare you deny it? Song Lianyue looked at the explicit words she had written in the letter and felt ashamed and furious. Master, please don't hit her. The legitimate mother embraced Song Lianyue, crying hysterically. Lianyue has always been a good girl. She must have been deceived by someone else to commit such a terrible act. I quickly interjected. Yes. The legitimate sister must have been deceived by Qin Kong. We should first drown Qin Kong in a pig's cage. No. Don't. Song Lianyue, hearing this, shouted with red eyes. I'm carrying his child. If he dies, I won't live either. The stepmother looked at her belly in disbelief. My father was so angry he almost fainted. The scene was truly dramatic. I wished I had a bowl of sunflower seeds nearby. In my previous life, it wasn't until the palace announced the selection of concubines that Song Lianyue dared to elope. My father, to save face, lied to the outside world that Song Lianyue had died of illness. To silence the rumors, they killed a maid, disfigured her face, and held a funeral for Song Lianyue. The maid they killed was my little maid Hong. So this time, I gave Song Lianyue some medicine that made her believe she was pregnant, forcing her to elope with Qing Kong at this time. Song Lianyue threatened to kill herself to protect Qing Kong and the child in her womb. Her stepmother held her and wept bitterly all night. The next morning, the news of the elopement of the Song family's legitimate daughter with a stable hand spread throughout the streets and alleys. When I went to visit Song Lianyue in her room, there were still dried bloodstains on her forehead, probably from banging her head against the wall last night. My father was so enraged he couldn't get out of bed, surviving only on ginseng soup. Song Lianyue looked at me with red eyes, her voice hoarse. Linger, in this situation, the only one who can save your sister is you. I curled my lips into a cold smile. In this situation, if my sister didn't stab her sister a few more times, she'd be showing mercy. She continued, I don't know if you've heard, but that matter has already spread. Although I was the one who spread it. I shook my head. How could that be? I am the legitimate daughter of the Song family and the face of the Song household. Now I have caused such a scandal. And my father is so angry he's fallen ill. The only way out is for you to take the blame for this matter. Marry Qing Kong, and preserve the Song family's reputation and the child in my womb. The legitimate mother hurriedly added. Don't worry. As long as you take the blame, we won't treat you badly. Your dowry will be arranged according to the standards of a legitimate daughter. You're just a concubine's daughter. Getting such a grand wedding is already a stroke of luck. I didn't get angry, I just smiled and said, all right, sister. The news of my marriage to Qing Kong spread quickly, and the rumors about Song Lianyue faded away. The legitimate mother planned to send Song Lianyue to a nunnery outside the city to give birth, telling everyone she was going to pray for her father's soul. The Song family's reputation was saved, and my father could finally manage to drink a few sips of porridge. Before leaving, Song Lianyue wanted to see Qing Kong one last time and asked me to deliver a letter for her. She held my hand tightly, looking magnanimous and composed. Linger, don't worry. This time I just want to cut all ties with him in person. From now on, he will only be your husband. I sneered inwardly. You two already have children, what's there to cut ties? I took the letter, rewrote it in Song Lianyue's handwriting, and delivered it to Qing Kong. That night, Song Lianyue waited outside the city gates all night but never saw Qing Kong, because Qing Kong slipped away under the cover of darkness, evading the guards, and went to the guest house's bedroom. Soon, screams of a woman echoed from inside. The guards quickly surrounded the bedroom. A skilled guard kicked open the door and found Qing Kong and his disheveled legitimate mother. After my father fell ill, the legitimate mother had been tending to him day and night, occasionally resting in the side courtyard. I rushed forward, hurriedly draping a cloak over my dazed stepmother, and whispered softly into her ear. Does this scene feel familiar to you? This despicable trick, you once used it to frame my own mother. In my previous life in the palace, I had spent many years reflecting on things I had been too young to understand as a child. My biological mother initially refused to confess, but after my stepmother took me to the dungeon to see her, she suddenly confessed. It wasn't until I grew up that I realized it was because my life was in my stepmother's hands, and my mother had traded her life for mine. Now that Song Lianyue's life and the entire Song family are in my hands, my stepmother has no choice but to take the blame. After this incident, my father was so enraged that he suffered a stroke and is now bedridden. He had only taken my mother as a concubine when his wife was pregnant, and we are his only two daughters, Song Lianyue and me. The Song family has fallen into my hands so easily. I took my mother back to our hometown and rebuilt her grave. My stepmother once said she was willing to kneel at my mother's grave to confess her sins, begging me to spare her and Song Lianyue. But I never believed in such claims of repentance. She must suffer the same fate and pain as my mother to truly atone for her sins. As the seasons changed, days passed in endless boredom. Until one day, news came from the capital that the palace was selecting the legitimate daughters of the Song family to be concubines. Song Lianyu was brought back from the nunnery by the elders of the Song family. After more than 2 years of hardship, even the thick makeup on her face couldn't hide the rough marks. As soon as she stepped down from the palanquin, she glared at me with hatred. Song Chuling, I know everything you've done. I won't let you off the hook. You framed me for a false pregnancy, drove my father to illness, drove my stepmother mad, and killed Qing Kong. I gently adjusted my hairpin and looked up at her. Sister, you've done so many things. Which one are you talking about? Song Lianyue was so enraged that her entire body trembled. She clenched the embroidered handkerchief so tightly that her fingertips were almost bleeding. Bring someone. Drag this poisonous woman out and beat her to death. As she spoke, the servants around her didn't stir. I smiled. Sister, take a good look. Is there anyone in the Song Mansion who is an old acquaintance? The song of the Song Mansion is now the song of Song Chuling. She shouted behind me. Song Chuling, you wait. I will definitely enter the palace and become an empress. I will definitely take my revenge. I didn't even bother to turn my head. Go wash up and go to sleep. That night, Xiao Hong helped me wash up. Her eyes filled with worry. Miss. I asked around at the laundry near the nunnery. Song Lianyue saved a fallen courtesan 2 months ago. They say the courtesan not only taught her how to avoid the palace's body search but also taught her many ways to seduce men. If she ever gains favor, then miss. Don't worry. She's going to the capital to die. Your young miss is alive and well. I patted her hand. You should focus on your marriage to your cousin. I've already prepared your dowry. The young girl had a thin skin, a single teasing remark made her face flush. Once you're married, I can go to the capital with peace of mind. What will you do in the capital? I'm bored here. I'll go to the capital to play at being empress. Xiao Hong stared at me for a long time without saying a word. What? Don't you believe your young mistress can become empress? No. It's not that. After following the young mistress for all these years, I believe she can accomplish anything. I just never imagined she would want to be empress. In my previous life, I was just one step away from becoming empress. But I wasn't necessarily determined to become empress. It was just that, at this moment, if I didn't go to the capital, my future husband might not survive. Shortly after Xiao Hong's wedding, I set off for the capital with Song Lianyu. I rode in a comfortable carriage, while Song Lianyu had to squeeze into the back with the servants. When we stopped by the roadside to rest, she lifted the curtain and glared at me. Song Chuling, one day, I will kill you. I took a bite of the roasted chicken leg. You should worry about whether I'll poison you and impersonate you to enter the palace instead. Hearing my words, Song Lianyue was so frightened she dared not even take a sip of water, starving herself to the point of climbing a tree in the middle of the night to pick wild fruits to eat. Her appearance was utterly ridiculous. Even if she were to enter the palace in the future, she would only end up being toyed with until she died. Everyone in the world knew that the old emperor favored slender beauties. Song Lianyu, to maintain her figure, ate only liquid food every day. Her waist so slender it could barely be grasped. It was said she had learned many seductive techniques from a fallen courtesan, so she was certain she would be favored over those stiff aristocratic ladies. However, few knew that the old emperor was already gravely ill, with only days left to live. Once the old emperor passes away, all these newly arrived concubines will be buried with him. In my previous life, the young master of the family who bought me heard about this and fled in the middle of the night. Out of desperation, my master had me take her place and enter the palace. I was lucky. The old emperor died before I entered the palace. I eventually became the concubine of the new emperor. The future emperor is the young Prince Xie Yunhan, who is now just 5 years old. To win his favor, I learned how to make straw crafts and sugar figurines on the journey to the capital, and even bought a few storybooks. In my previous life, among all the concubines, only I could lull Xie Yunhan to sleep. I dared not imagine how favored I would be in the palace now that I had learned so many new skills. I took a bite of the sugar-coated hawthorn. Its taste sour and sweet. This time, becoming the most favored concubine in the harem is within my grasp. Before I knew it, the day of entering the palace had arrived. Song Lianyue swayed her waist as she stepped through the palace gates, only to be immediately escorted to the cold palace by a palace matron. She didn't react in time, screaming in panic, "I won't go to the cold palace. That place isn't fit for humans. I don't want to be a concubine. Let me go. Let me go." Even those who had spent their entire lives in the harem had never seen a maiden being sent to the cold palace the moment she stepped through the palace gates. Only I knew that Song Lianyue's current fate was due to the slap I had given Xie Yunhan that day. Because of my frame-up, Song Lianyue was doomed to a tragic end. However, I never expected Xie Yunhan to act so swiftly. This man truly holds a grudge. I must stay far away from him for the rest of my life. Before entering the palace, I went to the Jiang mansion and entered the palace under the same identity as Jiang Wanning, the legitimate daughter of Jiang Tongpan. Just like in my previous life, after 2 months of learning the palace etiquette, it was finally my turn to attend the emperor. I knelt in the center of the bedchamber, bowing my head and saying, "Your Majesty, I can weave grasshoppers with rushes. Would you like to see?" From behind the yellow curtains, a cold snort echoed. "I didn't expect you to have so many tricks up your sleeve." A chill ran down my spine and spread throughout my body. I couldn't help but shiver, then raised my eyes to see Xie Yunhan walking toward me from behind the curtains. Xie Yunhan met my stunned gaze. "What? Don't you recognize me?" He was dressed in a bright yellow brocaded robe, exuding the innate aura of an emperor. "If you don't recognize me, then why did you slap me that day?" He watched with satisfaction as my expression began to crumble, murmuring my name softly, Song Chuling. I suddenly realized he had also been reborn. After reincarnating, Xie Yunhan ascended the throne as the new emperor. Half the candles in the bedchamber were extinguished, and his dark eyes reflected the flickering light. He gripped my chin, scrutinizing my expression with a playful expression. I trembled as I asked, "Did you intentionally hide the fact that you ascended the throne from me? How else could I wait for you to come to me willingly? My beloved concubine? Emperor. What about Xie Yunhan? You protected him in your previous life, and you're still protecting him in this one?" His brows were furrowed with malice. "What? Do you want to go and join him in death?" I clutched his sleeve. "It was my fault for using you in my previous life. He's just a child. Don't take his life." Xie Yunhan's lips curled into a cold smile. "You reincarnated knowing you wanted revenge. Why do you think I won't seek revenge on you? I've only been reincarnated for 3 years, and I never expected to die so soon." I couldn't hold back my tears, which fell onto Xie Yunhan's hand. "Don't cry." He furrowed his brows impatiently. "I haven't even started yet. Since I was going to die anyway, I no longer feared him. All the grievances in my heart poured out. Every time I was almost killed, he stood in front of me to protect me. So many people wanted his throne and his life. What did I do wrong by protecting him? If I wanted to harm you, I would have done so long ago. Instead, I even gave you money for your journey. You also slapped me." Xie Yunhan's eyes darkened. Then he suddenly smiled. "You dare not admit it. Using your elder sister's name to take the blame. That slap was something he would never forget in his lifetime." Thinking back, I was truly bold and reckless at the time. I didn't know how to defend myself. so I simply rolled my eyes and fainted. Everything went dark before my eyes. And I heard Xie Yunhan's cold laughter. You acted really badly. I was sent back to my palace. I dared not open my eyes. In a daze, I really fell asleep. In my dream, I saw scenes from my previous life. Xie Yunhan, a small figure dressed in a dragon robe, sat upright in the grand hall. He couldn't understand a word the ministers were saying and dared not move a muscle. During the meal after court, I scooped a bowl of milk porridge for him and whispered, "Your Majesty, you must eat well so you can grow tall and strong." Xie Yunhan looked up at me and asked, "Sister, can I still grow up?" Even though he was just a child, he sensed the treacherous atmosphere around him. Xie Yunhan's uncle was the renowned General Shen, a hero of many battles. Lu Xiang, in order to elevate his own nephew Xie Yunpi to power, colluded with foreign enemies, leading to the death of General Shen and his two sons beyond the border. The Shen clan thus fell into decline. Xie Yunhan had no relatives left in this world and no one to rely on. Now he was nothing more than a puppet that could be killed at any moment. After coming to power, Xie Yunbi abused his authority in the palace, and countless palace maids and concubines were tortured and killed by him and his henchmen. Everyone knew he was a beast. Every time he saw me, Xie Yunhan would stand in front of me, preventing him from coming within a step of me. He stood there motionless, narrowing his eyes as his gaze lingered on me, his expression lecherous and repulsive. The Empress consort is indeed as beautiful as the rumors say. I knew that Xie Yunbi would eventually come after me, but I never expected him to be so brazen as to attack me in broad daylight. He killed the palace maid at the door, burst into my chambers, and pinned me down on the dressing table. My hairpins and ornaments scattered everywhere. I thought I was probably going to die. This time, Xie Yunhan couldn't protect me, so I decided to try and protect him instead. I reached up and pulled out a hairpin from my hair, then stabbed him with it before he could react. Xie Yunbi screamed and let go of me. Blood stained half his face. He covered his eyes and screamed in agony on the ground. Before his men could rush in, I climbed out the window and fled. At that time, Xie Yunhan was the only prince who had not bowed to Xie Yunbi. I knelt before Xie Yunhan, trembling all over, and told him that I was willing to do anything to survive. That night, I stayed in his room. Everyone around him found it strange, as Xie Yunhan was renowned for his disinterest in women. Some court officials had sent numerous beauties to his mansion to curry favor with him, but they were all sent back. Yet he kept me by his side. I thought perhaps those beauties wouldn't poison him. Xie Yunpi nearly died from my stab wound. During the half year I spent lying in his bed, Xie Yunhan killed many people, built his own power base, and became the regent with absolute control over the court. Everyone cursed me as a demonic concubine who had brought disaster to the country, colluding with the regent to control the government. But Xie Yunhan knew in his heart that no matter how obedient I appeared before him, the person I truly loved was not him. His close advisors urged him to kill me, for sooner or later, I would become the greatest threat to his power. That day, he choked me, tightening his grip on my neck. I stared into his dark eyes and told him I was pregnant. He summoned the imperial physician to take my pulse, who confirmed it was a pregnancy. After that night, he never came to see me again. Soon after, the country descended into chaos. Xie Yunbi led his troops into the palace, advancing all the way to the main hall. The palace was engulfed in flames, turning the night sky red. Eunuchs and palace maids fled in all directions. The sounds of horse hooves, swords, and arrows, and screams echoing endlessly. I was wearing Xie Yunhan's robes and was brought before Xie Yunbi. The eye he had blinded was covered with a black patch, and the other eye glared at me with such hatred that it seemed he wanted to kill me. "Where did you hide the young emperor? You won't speak?" No problem. I have all the time in the world to torture you. You didn't want me to touch you? Well, I'll give you to my soldiers. Xie Yunhan ordered his men. You can do whatever you want with the Empress. But don't kill her. Leave her alive. I want this whore to suffer more than death. I propped myself up on the ground, gasping for breath and laughing. You dog! You should thank me for sparing your eye back then, allowing you to sit here today and watch the show. All these years, I've regretted not being ruthless enough that day, not driving that hairpin deeper into your eye to end your life. In recent years, no one dared to mention the eye he lost in front of Xie Yunhan. He was completely enraged by me, looking almost mad. Bring someone. Blind this wretch's eyes. Cut off his limbs. And turn him into a human pig. I continued to mock him. Even if you grind my bones to dust, you'll still only have one eye. If you ascend the throne, our great Yin dynasty will have its first one-eyed emperor. Xie Yunhan grabbed a knife and charged toward me. Just as the blade was about to strike, an arrow whizzed past my face, piercing Xie Yunhan's lone eye, which was red with rage. I slowly turned my head and saw Xie Yunhan, clad in armor, holding a bow and arrow, charging toward us on horseback. He grabbed the back of my collar and lifted me onto the horse. I lay on the galloping horse, unable to scream in fear for the first time. He had clearly been lying in ambush at the city gates waiting for Xie Yunhan. Why risk his life to enter the palace? I couldn't understand, and I had no time to think. My body was weak and limp. I struggled to climb up his body and looked up at him, saying, Xie Yunhan, I'm not pregnant. I took the medicine to save my life. He glanced down at me and sneered. What? You didn't die earlier? Now you want to die by my hand? Inside the palace, corpses piled up like mountains. Blood flowed everywhere, and arrows rained down like rain. A sharp whistle rang in my ears as I threw myself onto his chest, and an arrow pierced my back. Blood gushed from my mouth and nose. Through the blood-stained haze, I saw Xie Yunhan's face filled with disbelief. Even I couldn't believe I had taken the arrow for him. I've already taken poison. I won't last much longer. I'm not afraid of death, but I'm afraid I won't be able to endure the torture and reveal the Emperor's whereabouts. Xie Yunhan, why did I have to take the arrow for you? You bastard? It hurts so damn much. After waking from the dream, I regretted it deeply. I had acted my whole life in front of Xie Yunhan, and now, on the brink of death, I suddenly didn't want to act anymore. If I had known he had been reborn, when I saved him from the arrow in my previous life, I should have pretended to be deeply in love with him. Now it's too late to act. Xie Yunhan had just ascended the throne, and the realm was still unstable. He was busy every day. I thought he might forget about me for a while, but to my surprise, he summoned me to dine with him in the evening. He was wearing a purple robe, just like in my previous life. You look better in purple. What? Do you think I'm not worthy of wearing the imperial robe? I rarely compliment you. Why are you so sensitive? I had been locked up all day and hadn't had a single drop of water. I sat down at the table and served myself a bowl of bird's nest soup. The eunuch hurriedly reminded me of the rules, but Xie Yunhan dismissed him. I took 2 sips of the soup and began eating on my own. I wasn't satisfied with what was in my bowl and started reaching for his chopsticks. I slowly swallowed the food in my mouth and glared at him. Since I'm going to die anyway, I might as well die full. Xie Yunhan tugged at his lips. You already look pretty full. It wasn't enough. I ate 2 more bowls of rice. Xie Yunhan didn't eat a single bite, just propped his head up and watched me. It made me wonder if he had poisoned the food. But upon further reflection, I knew I wasn't that unlucky. Xie Yunhan, that psychopath, wouldn't kill me so easily. I thought you'd ask me about Xie Yunhan's whereabouts. What's the point? You wouldn't kill him anyway. And now that I'm in your hands, even if I knew, I couldn't do anything. How do you know I wouldn't kill him? You must have made the late emperor change his will before he died. If you kill the former crown prince right after ascending the throne and offend General Shen, wouldn't you be crazy? I poured myself a cup of wine and took a sip. Besides, how many emperors throughout history have lived long lives? If he doesn't become emperor, he can grow up happily. Xie Yunhan's eyes darkened. I snapped out of it and smiled at him. Your Majesty, of course you won't have a short life. You will live as long as the sea and as tall as the mountains, and live as long as heaven and earth. Song Chuling, he said coldly. I am a man, not a turtle. I wish Xie Yunhan was that turtle in the wishing pool. I'd toss a coin, and he'd spare my life. Xie Yunhan said I had to please him to stay alive. For an entire month, he summoned me to his bedchamber every night. I grew increasingly emaciated, while he grew more vibrant each day. I realized he was torturing me slowly, turning me into the scourge of the entire harem. Soon, the entire harem would begin plotting against me. And one day, I would die without a proper burial. Xie Yunhan was reviewing memorials at his desk, while I ground ink at the table until my hands ached. Your Majesty, the harem must not interfere in state affairs. Perhaps we should find another eunuch to grind ink for you. He sneered. Unless I kill you. Where in this world would there be any secrets? A tyrant, always ready to kill. However, Xie Yunhan was indeed reborn. Many of the rebellions from his previous life had been dealt with by him. Over the past 2 years, the power of the Liu family had been gradually dismantled by him, and Liu Xiang's daughter had been prevented from marrying Xie Yunbi through his schemes. Without Liu Xiang as his backing, Xie Yunbi was now nothing more than a toothless tiger. After finishing the memorials, Xie Yunhan didn't forget to pin me down on the bed and torment me for an hour. His cool lips kissed from the side of my face to my neck, his sharp teeth biting lightly and then harder into the tender flesh of my neck. If it weren't for the palace maid bringing the midnight snack, I think he would have bitten me to death. I hurriedly pulled my clothes together and stood up. Just as I was about to take the food box from the palace maid, she suddenly dropped it and knelt down with a thud. Your Majesty, the concubine by your side is not Jiang Tongpan's daughter Jiang Wanning, she is my younger sister Song Chuling. Song Chuling impersonated her identity to enter the palace, which is a capital offense. I looked at Song Lianyue's face, filled with grief and anger, and furrowed my brows. I wondered who had plotted against me, releasing her from the cold palace and arranging for her to go to Xie Yunhan to make accusations. Xie Yunhan took a sip of tea, seeming unfazed by the sudden appearance of Song Lianyue. If that is indeed the case, she deserves to be executed by slow slicing. I picked up the food box, dug out a piece of osmanthus cake, and took a bite. Song Lianyu looked at me in astonishment. How dare you eat the emperor's food? I picked up a chestnut pastry, took a bite, and smiled at her. Someone like me, who has committed a capital offense. Isn't that exactly what they use for poison testing? Xie Yunhan looked at the memorial in his hand and said with his eyes downcast. Eat less tonight. You've gained some weight recently. I ignored him and stuffed another almond milk cake into my mouth. Today's pastries seem better than before. Xie Yunhan said. A new imperial chef specializing in pastries has recently joined the imperial kitchen. If you like them, ask him to make more tomorrow. Song Lianyue listened to our conversation and seemed to have gone dumb. After a moment of stupor, she slammed her forehead against the ground and trembled all over, saying, Your Majesty, Song Chuling is a poisonous woman. She drove her stepmother mad, angered her father to death, and framed me for something I didn't do. Please avenge me. Xie Yunhan raised an eyebrow at me. Song Chuling, I never expected you to be so cruel. Even slow execution would be too lenient for you. I will exterminate your entire clan. Song Lianyue glared at me with hatred, her expression shifting from triumph to panic. Your Majesty. Did you say exterminate the entire clan? Xie Yunhan coldly glanced at her. Did you just tell me that you are her legitimate older sister? Song Lianyue's face turned as white as paper, her body trembling uncontrollably, until she could no longer hold herself up and fainted. So that's what it means to faint from sheer terror. I never expected Xie Yunhan would let me see Xie Yunqing again. Just like in my previous life. After the Empress's death, he spent nights in nightmares, crying uncontrollably. And during the day, he refused to eat or drink, and no one could comfort him. I sat by his bedside without speaking, instead using reeds to slowly weave a butterfly, which I then handed to him. He reached out to take it, but I pointed to the soup beside me. Drink a sip of soup, and I'll give it to you to play with. He stopped crying and drinking, and the old nurse attending him in the room finally sighed in relief. I handed him the butterfly and said, drink 2 more sips, and I'll make anything you want for you. Xie Yunqing thought for a moment. I want a big tiger. That's too difficult. You have to drink at least 5 sips. Xie Yunqing only drank 3 sips of soup, so I did my best to make something that looked like a tiger for him. He smiled for the first time in a long while and spoke to me at length. I stroked his head. Your Highness, I lost my mother when I was 5. Just like you. At first, I cried all night long, thinking about my mother every day. But later, I thought, my mother wouldn't want to see me like this. She wants to see me eat well, sleep well, and live well. Xie Yunqing nodded understandingly. Sister, I understand. Mother must also want to see me doing well. I told him a few more stories, and he finally fell asleep. The nurse said he hadn't cried or fussed in his sleep, which was rare. By the time I returned to my chambers, it was already very late. The room was dark, and when I pushed open the door, I caught a glimpse of a figure sitting at the table. I couldn't help but startle, but upon recognizing the face, I suppressed the urge to scream. I walked over and lit the lamp in the room, and the surroundings brightened. Your Majesty, are you reminiscing about your past life as a ghost? He lifted his eyelids and gave me a cold glance. I thought you were missing your husband from your past life and would spend the night with Xie Yunqing. If I were 2 years older, I could have had a child as old as Xie Yunqing. How could I treat him like his husband? I found it amusing. Your Majesty, are you jealous? The air fell silent for a moment. Xie Yunhan stared at me for a while before speaking. In your past life, you were so good to him. You were willing to use me by any means necessary for him, and even risked your own life to save him. Memories of my past life flooded into my mind, and I closed my eyes. He called me sister in private. My mother was pregnant with me when she died. If she hadn't been framed by her stepmother, I might have had a younger brother or sister. Perhaps I really did see him as my own brother. In my past life, I did everything just so he could grow up. If he had grown up, maybe he wouldn't have had to become a puppet. It was my fault in my past life. You can do whatever you want with me. Xie Yunhan suddenly gripped my wrist, his grip gradually loosening. He looked at me through the flickering candlelight. The arrow you took from me has stayed with me for 2 lifetimes. I looked at the bamboo basket on the table and sighed. If I had known the emperor wouldn't kill me, I wouldn't have made so many gold ingots for myself. Xie Yunhan scoffed coldly. That was for your mother's anniversary. You were folding them for her. I furrowed my brows. How does the emperor know everything? He wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me onto the bed with him. I've been deceived too many times, so I investigated your entire background. I propped myself up on his chest and asked, does your Majesty think I'm pitiful? He stroked my hair and sighed. Pitiful, but also hateful. In this life, Xie Yunhan became emperor. and the realm was much more stable. I no longer had to scheme constantly to survive like in my previous life. And my days were leisurely. I made a few strings of candied hawthorn for Xie Yunhan. The sourness made his eyes squint, and his face lit up with the innocence of a child. My royal brother has already granted me the title of Prince Chen. I'll be moving out of the palace next month to establish my own estate. The old nurse said I'll have to start my education then. And I'll have to study all day. He licked the sugar residue from his lips. Sister-in-law, will you come visit me? I froze for a moment. What did you call me? Xie Yunhan's voice was innocent and earnest. My royal brother said I can't call you sister anymore. I asked him what I should call you. And he said I should call you sister-in-law. On the way back to the palace, my mind was in turmoil. And my head felt heavy and confused, like a tangled ball of string. I dismissed the palace maids who had accompanied me and sat by the lake for a long time. When I turned around, I collided with a pair of cold, piercing eyes. You're the woman the fourth prince loves the most? Xie Yunbi looked at me with a vicious smile. Tell me, if I were to take advantage of you, would the fourth prince go mad? I tugged at my lip. What? You can't defeat him in the imperial court. So you have to take it out on women? He was still the same as in my previous life. Easily provoked by me. Xie Yunbi's expression twisted, and he reached out to choke my neck. I pulled open the perfume pouch at my waist and sprinkled the powder on his face. In the moment he froze, I pulled the golden hairpin from my head and stabbed it into his neck with all my strength. Blood spurted out instantly, flowing down my palm along the veins. Hui Chun, Sang Er, Li Chun, Xiu Lan, Qing Shu, Huai Rong, Xu Chui, Wei Yu. He stared at me with wide eyes, his mouth agape, unable to utter a word. He didn't ask, but I whispered to him. In our previous lives, they were all women in the harem who were defiled and killed by you. There were many more, and I didn't even know their names. What I regret most is that in my previous life, I only took his eyes with that hairpin and did not take his life. This time, I watched him take his last breath in my hands. In this life, at least I did not live in vain. I was brought before the grand hall and knelt before Xie Yunhan. Beside him, his trusted old minister, Ji Gulao, could not stop muttering, Your Majesty. Lady Wan's attempt to assassinate the prince is a crime punishable by the execution of 9 generations of her family. Xie Yunhan seemed not to notice my blood-stained clothes. He furrowed his brows and said, Lady Wan has always been gentle and weak. I do not believe she would do such a thing. Ji Gulao, his old bones thudding on the ground, exclaimed, There are no virtuous women in this world who would kill so ruthlessly. Your Majesty, for your own safety, you must not keep such a vicious woman by your side. Xie Yunhan feigned distress, furrowing his brows slightly. She is pregnant. It seems we cannot kill her. At those words, I was stunned. When did I become pregnant? How could I not know? It wasn't until Xie Yunhan glared at me fiercely that I realized he was telling me to play along. I immediately covered my chest and pretended to be about to vomit. I understood the signal Xie Yunhan was giving me. He wanted me to make something up. He couldn't think of anything else. I thought for a moment and whispered, I have learned some first aid techniques. When I passed by the lake, I saw Prince Bai injured and lying on the ground. Without thinking much, I rushed over to help him press the wound to stop the bleeding. But the perfume powder on Prince Bai's face. The perfume powder contains some white medicine. I thought it might help stop the bleeding. I looked meek and innocent, and Ji Gulao was completely taken in by my words. Xie Yunhan walked over, helped me up from the ground, and said, Wan Fei is truly kind-hearted. Ji Lao, what do you think of me making her empress? At this, both I and Ji Gulao were completely stunned. Just then, a palace guard rushed in to report. Your Majesty, The weapon used to assassinate Prince Bai has been found. It is the golden hairpin on Lady Wan's head. We have investigated and found that Lady Wan did not notice the hairpin falling off. It was picked up by the assassin, who used it to kill Prince Bai and then framed Lady Wan. I clutched my chest in shock and exclaimed, "What a treacherous motive! Have you captured the assassin?" "Yes. The assassin infiltrated the selection of concubines a year ago and goes by the name Song Lianyue." Upon hearing the name Song Lianyue, I nearly burst into laughter. I had considered framing her, but never imagined she would be accused of such a heinous crime. It was reported that Song Lianyue confessed on her deathbed that she was sent by Prime Minister Liu. Xie Yunhan used this opportunity to force Prime Minister Liu into retirement. This lifetime is unlike the previous one, which was filled with chaos and strife. The world was peaceful, and the people lived in contentment. Looking at it this way, Xie Yunhan really was cut out to be an emperor. At night, Xie Yunhan gently pushed aside the strands of hair that had been dampened by sweat on my forehead. My eyelashes fluttered slightly as I asked him, "After I die, did you become emperor in your previous life?" "I don't know who ended up becoming emperor," Xie Yunhan said. "Liu Xiang colluded with foreign invaders, ruthlessly invading the vast lands of the empire. I died on the battlefield, recalling the shattered lands of my previous life. I suddenly felt a pang of sadness. Liu Xiang was able to retire to his hometown in this life. He really got off easy." Xie Yunhan's fingers, cool as jade, twirled my black hair as he said softly, "I've already arranged for someone to wait for him on his way home. I thought you wouldn't kill anyone this lifetime. To be an emperor, one must be wise. So in public, I don't kill much." He looked at me in the moonlight and smiled. "By the way, an emperor can't lie either. So you must give me an heir." The corners of his eyes glistened with tears as he pulled me into his embrace. Before I could react, he dragged me into that dark, passionate embrace. That night, I slept deeply. I dreamed of the first time I saw Xie Yunhan in this life. He was still a powerless prince, hiding from pursuers by blending in with refugees fleeing a disaster. He sat on the ground in ragged clothes, and I, wearing a light blue robe, looked down at him. Xiao Hong tugged at my sleeve. "Don't go over there, miss. His eyes are all red, he's scary." In my previous life, Xie Yunhan had always held a high position, and I had to go to great lengths to please him just to keep him from taking my life. I never imagined I would see him so humble before me. A sly smile curved my lips as I handed him the white flour cake I was holding. He took a bite, still gazing at me with red eyes. I raised my hand and slapped him. "Did you say thank you?" He lowered his eyes slightly and whispered, "Thank you." As he turned to leave, I glanced back at him and seemed to see a glistening tear in the corner of his eye. At the time, I thought he had been hit by my slap and was crying, which made me feel even more satisfied. Now that I think about it, Xie Yunhan had gone to the battlefield at the age of 14 and had never shed a single tear. No matter how severe his injuries, how could he have been made to cry by a single slap from me? I slowly opened my eyes and murmured his name. Xie Yunhan. Xie Yunhan didn't know if he was asleep or awake. The hand resting on my waist tightened slightly. "Did you cry the first time you saw me in this life?" The faint candlelight illuminated his deep, clear eyes. I rested my face against his chest and stared at him for a long time. Xie Yunhan hugged me tightly, kissed the top of my head, and murmured softly. He opened his sleepy eyes, met my stunned gaze, and suddenly smiled. "Ah Ling, in our past life, you were the one who provoked me. In this life, you've fallen into my hands. You must accept your fate." I never expected that I would be entangled with Xie Yunhan for 2 lifetimes. This morning, Xie Yunhan had already issued an edict appointing me as Empress. Since I had no maternal clan or backing, he had me adopt General Shen as my foster father. I didn't have to scheme, He had already planned everything for me. Besides my mother, no one had ever schemed for me before. Falling into his hands again in this life didn't seem so bad after all. I never would have guessed that two heartless people like Xie Yunhan and me would end up together in this life. My eyes welled up as I looked at him. If I had known, I would have taken a few more arrows for you. No. You must die after me. I cannot live alone in this world anymore. He looked at me through the silent night. His dark eyes tinged with icy coldness that gradually melted away. He reached out to tuck the blanket around me and sighed helplessly. Sleep now, Empress. Tomorrow is the coronation ceremony. I leaned against his chest and slowly closed my eyes. The winter night was quiet, with the sound of burning charcoal in the stove and the crunch of snow breaking branches outside. The night sky was dotted with twinkling stars, and I knew tomorrow would be a sunny day.